All right, I am so excited to welcome back onto Theater and College Hoops, one of the best dudes in the business, an ardent supporter of us, which is very meaningful. It's truly one of the best dudes we know, writer and podcaster for the Field of 68 and Heat Check, and the co-host of The Pod is the Roof. I was not able to say that this time last year when we had him on, but he is the co-host of The Pod is the Roof. We got Riley Davis joining us. Riley, what's going on, man? It's good to see your face.
Yeah, it's good to see you too, man. I know you told me before we recorded, it's been about a year since my last appearance. So glad to be back on, glad to talk some hoops. And even just thinking about it, the last time I was on, man, like Carolina was the fastest. Well, I guess I should preface for those who are unfamiliar with the Pod as a Roof. It is a UNC basketball podcast, the UNC basketball podcast of the Field of 68. I'm a huge Carolina fan. And this time last year, I had watched my team go from preseason #1 to unranked in like 2 weeks and then lose to a bunch of mediocre to bad teams, often in close and antagonizing fashion. And what a difference a year makes, where I saw today the ticker at the bottom of ESPN said #7 UNC playing NC State tomorrow. I'm like, man, it is so nice to have a single digit next to our name again. So I'm feeling great. Vibes are high with my program. But, as a whole, been a great year too. Been a great year for the sport. So I'm excited to talk a little hoops today.
Absolutely. And look, I'm very happy that Carolina is standing firm in the top 10. You've hit on a lot of hot spots, by the way, Riley. Like I'm looking at my agenda and you were spraying and we're gonna get to all of that in detail, right? In detail is what I want to do. But Carolina's had a wonderful start to the season. And last episode, Riley, I was talking about, in my estimation at least, the importance of all the Tobacco Road teams being good. And I love it when that happens because we're always going to have Duke and Carolina. We're always going to get up for that. There was a time in my high school to college days where I'd get super pumped for a Chris Paul versus Julius Hodge, NC State, right? NC State versus Carolina. You mentioned you got NC State. Of course, as we're recording this, Wake Forest just lost to FSU, which is such a shame. But does it feel like, I mean, you look at the ACC, if we were to record this a couple hours ago, you look at the top four in the ACC, it's Tobacco Road.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like in the conference as a whole, I think is probably I think it might be a little bit worse than it was last year, but I also can't remember if I'm just saying that because last year I was banging the drum for the ACC trying to say my team wasn't that bad. And by proxy, I was like, I'm telling you, Pitt's not a terrible team anymore. NC State, they're halfway decent. Whereas this year, I'm like, hey, my team is the best, and the rest of these bums need to get in line. But I love that you brought up Wake Forest because it's a fan base that is very passionate. For those who aren't in the South, I sort of make fun of Wake Forest a little bit, but you gotta respect because it's not a big school. It's like 3,000 students. A very affluent fan base to use the more politically correct term, maybe, or the nice way to say it. I just feel like if you go to a Wake Forest football game, you're gonna see the same like carbon copy male wearing a barber jacket, some bean boots, maybe, usually with a woman with blonde hair and some like golden goose sneakers, maybe a Canada Goose jacket. Like it's very much that kind of crowd, a little uppity, if you will. But they are very passionate. They have a strong hatred for Carolina and really most like rival schools that you wouldn't expect to see people who are that done up and kind of giving the appearance of sophistication to just lose their absolute minds for Dave Clawson and the Demon Deacons on the football field. And so like, I'm happy for them to see it, Steve Forbes figure something out this year. Cause yeah, I've always thought Forbes's like offenses were really fun to watch. And he's obviously a great X's and O's coach, and what he's been able to do with just basically stealing whatever guard like you've sort of neglected and turning them into a superstar. Like it's cool to see them actually sustain that into real success and have a great shot to get into the tournament.
I saw your tweet a couple weeks ago. It was in response to someone who, and it wasn't combative or anything like that. I think someone was trying to say, like, who would have thought? How crazy is it that Boopy Miller, who are like Tyree Appleby, whomever Steve Forbes brings in, it's like, it's crazy that these guys are doing X, Y, and Z. And you're like, this is what Steve Forbes does.
It was about Hunter Salas from a Gonzaga fan. Yeah.
You.
My guy, his name's Tuck Clary. He's a great writer who covers Gonzaga and the sport as a whole. And yeah, he wasn't even necessarily It was complaining by this a little bit of the state of Gonzaga, I think, but I'm like, hey man, you can't hold Hunter Salas's explosion against Mark Few. Like, we know Few's a great coach. This is just what Steve Forbes does when he gets a transfer guard. I don't know what he does. I don't know what confidence he instills in these guys that just turn them into superstars, but it's the third year in a row, like that he's taken a guard who was either inefficient or not even productive at all, and had them as a conference player of the year contender at the very least.
Hey, I want to pivot back to you. In my haste, Riley, of talking about Tobacco Road teams, I just immediately dove in. But what I wanted to do and really emphasize first and foremost is your new podcast, man. Amazing work. You guys do terrific, terrific content. You just had John Henson on, Carolina legend, which is amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about how this launched? I mean, I last time we spoke, Riley, I got a better understanding, and our audience got a better understanding of who you are, how you got into this space. And now, with some of these projects that you're continuing to create and capitalize on, I want to focus in on the pod as the roof. Tell us about it from its inception.
Oh yeah, thanks for asking, and I appreciate all the kind words about it. It's a lot of fun to do. My co-host Jacob Karabatsis, I've said before that he and Subbi would be great friends because they're both into film and Boston sports. Maybe a little too much, but we want to have a crossover at some point. But yeah, with the Field of 68, I first got connected really to Goodman and Rob Doster almost 3 years ago. Just through honestly some like basically Twitter connections. And last season I was doing a lot of work for the Field of 68 daily newsletter, doing a lot of writing and doing some editing for that as well. Then about 3.5 months ago, my wife and I welcomed our first child into the world, and just kind of being honest, writing a newsletter is a ton of work. Like how much we would cover, especially during the season. I would do all the weekend recaps, and ton went into that. And when our son was born, I kind of like told Mike Miller, the guy who runs the Field 68 Daily, like, hey, I want to take a step back from this and focus more on like basically the podcasting side of things, because I've done some podcasting with Heat Check. We've been a little more sporadic this year with our podcast, or a little less frequent, because we're also doing a lot of like crossover work with Sleepers Media, who I know you've had Greg Waddell on before, and doing different podcasts with them, different game previews and game recaps, which got to give a plug for that on the Sleepers Media YouTube channel too. Love doing that with those guys. So yeah, just talking about that. Eventually I sort of stepped away from the newsletter altogether, and it coincided with Doster basically reaching out to me and Jacob and asking if we wanted to do a UNC specific podcast. Because I think they were sort of shaking up how they were doing their team specific podcasts and bringing in more like, I guess maybe this would have been a good reference like 6 years ago when Kevin Durant called us blog boys, how they were switching more to media folks than and less like doing the former player model that they had kind of done some through the first couple of years of the network. So yeah, that was how it started. And I feel like Jacob and I just had pretty good chemistry right away. And I love just being able to, especially after a big win, just fire up a Zoom call and react to what we saw Carolina do. It's been a lot of fun this year. So
Brainstorming the name. Can you take us inside the whiteboard session?
Yes, we originally were called Hark the Pod, which is a reference to the UNC alma mater, which is Hark the Sound. Then we found out that the school newspaper already had a podcast called Hark the Pod.
And wait, how did you find that out? Did they reach out to you?
They reached out to us. Yeah, they emailed the Field of 68. And there's part of me that's like, oh man, I really like Hark the Pod. But that took a step back. I'm like, I can't be 31 years old going to war with a student newspaper. So we're just going to change it.
All right. Not now, honey. I cannot change the diaper. I got to respond to this email.
I gotta email some 19-year-olds back about why I should be Hark the Pod.
That's right.
So yeah, we were just kind of thinking through. We wanted something that would like immediately strike a chord with UNC fans, and of course, 2017, last time Carolina won the national championship. Probably, I can't remember what game it was, but Michael Jordan came to the Dean Dome, and what was funny was like Jordan was there to promote the Jordan brand sponsoring the football team. It was all Jordan is about the bag. That's one thing you got to know about him. He's going to show up when there are checks involved. And yeah, so he's there promoting the football team. And obviously Carolina had a great team that year. And that was when he said the ceiling is the roof. So that birthed the pod is the roof. I guess 6, 7 years later. So
I love it. That's terrific. I mean, it cracks me up. I'm not gonna lie. Like, obviously, I take your analysis and your thoughts on the game very seriously, but when I see the pot is the roof, I just crack up a little bit inside.
Hey, that's what we want. That's a great blend. You got to have analysis and entertainment. I mean, you know all about that. You got to have
No,
some fun with it.
you guys got a great balance, that's for sure. All right, I'm gonna pivot back now to Carolina and let's talk about the headman, Hubert Davis. Riley, it has been, I don't want to say tumultuous. I don't want to say a roller coaster, but as it relates to the rhetoric around Hubert Davis, it has been back and forth. And I feel like
Mhm.
I'm being not like I'm nauseous, and I'm not even a Carolina fan. You got folks after a title game appearance and a very close, like inches away from an actual championship, talking about Hubert Davis and the seamless transition. He
Mhm.
already beat K. And then, of course, you referenced last year and where you were sitting at this point last year. And then I'm hearing about not only a hot seat, but he's fired, or the first like week or so of the next season is going to be super critical. Now he's a top 10. He's got a top 10 team. The rhetoric for me, Riley, let me sort of pause it where I was a bit insane as it relates to trying to get rid of Hubert Davis, because I'm over here like it's just his first year. He went
Yeah,
to a title game. Like,
right.
obviously last year did not live up to standards, but
Mhm.
we cannot be this reactionary. And I think we're seeing the benefits of that.
Mhm.
Give me your general thoughts on the rhetoric that has surrounded him in his short tenure and what we can expect moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's great, and you hit on it. It's very reactionary, and I think part of it, is the current state of college hoops, where we are in the NIL portal era, where everything comes back to money, and I don't have any connections to the people working in NIL with Carolina, but I guess I've connected with people who are connected to people to know that UNC is doing very well in that department. And I think that's probably why there's more of a sentiment among yeah, plenty of Carolina fans. It's definitely been a lot quieter this year as far as saying like, why are this whole like hiring Roy's right hand man? It doesn't really play in this era because we have money and we could go out and I don't know, lure like a Scott Drew type or Jerome Tang or pick whatever. I guess Drew would probably be harder because he's been at Baylor forever. Like whatever up and comer you want. Eric Musselman, another name that you could throw out there, and then they would walk to Chapel Hill because it's UNC. To an extent, I do think like UNC is a great job. Obviously, it's hard for me to separate my bias from that, but I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who wouldn't say it's one of the top 2 or 3 jobs in the sport. And I think almost any coach would say yes to that job. However, like with Hubert in particular, I think he's most importantly learned from last season and has like he completely rebooted the roster, and it was a risk. I was skeptical of some of his portal additions. I wasn't crazy about the Cormac Ryan pickup when it happened, and then as the offseason wore on, it's like okay, there aren't that many like 3-and-D or 3-point shooting guards even available. Like I'm glad Carolina nabbed one. Even Harrison Ingram, I initially was really excited about when UNC got him, just because I didn't think there'd be many 3/4 type of like power wings in the portal. But that got plenty of criticism too. I've talked to a number of people who are like, yeah, I don't think Ingram's that good. Like he disappeared too many times at Stanford. He's not athletic enough. His jumpers like all over the place. It's really just he's a good passer, and that's kind of it. Ingram has completely blossomed this year under Hubert, and I think he's, the biggest stylistic shift. The pushing the pace and returning to like running some secondary break type stuff gets a lot of attention, but he also completely scrapped like this conservative drop coverage that UNC ran last year on defense. Where if you go back and I even made a little like edit of this in the offseason, UNC almost lost to Gardner Webb last season. I want to say they only beat Gardner Webb by like 5 or 6 and just gave up a lot of easy looks. And if you watched it, it was like Armando was it dropped back like super deep in his drop coverage. And it just gave up so many mid rangers that were wide open. It let guards into the paint at will. There was no stunting, no gambling, no pressure. And Hubert completely did away with that. He's playing way more aggressively. And he's changing up ball screen coverages. He's turning to like actually using some full court press a lot more frequently, both when Carolina is up, when Carolina is down. Like I think he's done a tremendous job. like really getting a lot out of this roster, because I still think there are some like inherent flaws of this roster, and they could use another wing, they could use more athleticism, but he's done a tremendous job so far maximizing the guys he has.
Terrific detailed response there. There's a lot to unpack. Let me hit on Harrison Ingram first, because there were a couple big names that have gone from the ACC to Pac-12 highway, and they've crossed paths, right? And we'll get to another one that impacts the both of us. But I've played against, like, obviously I haven't played. Geez, what am I saying? As an Arizona fan, I've like, Stanford gives us fits. They actually just beat
Oh,
Arizona
right.
and
Yeah.
smacked them. But the last couple years, it seems as if Arizona always plays them in the Pac-12 tournament. And I can tell you, playing Harrison Ingram was quite a pain in the tail. That may have been, some of the reasoning and the feedback regarding Harrison Ingram may have been a result of having to share the ball with Spencer Jones, who is a tremendous player as well.
Mhm.
But Harrison Ingram is a stud. So when I heard Hubert brought him over, bulbs went off, and I was really excited regarding that. That kind of dovetails into what we saw this past Saturday, because you had mentioned he's blossoming quite well, and he is. But this past Saturday, in a knockdown, drag him out kind of game against Clemson, where you don't go to the free throw line, where they don't hit any threes for the most part, it was a very, very bare knuckle brawl type of game. I saw something very interesting, Riley, and I didn't validate it. I'm just taking it for what it's worth. But Hubert Davis seems to be pushing the right buttons in terms of lineups. And it said that Harrison Ingram and Seth Trimble were the only two that played, that did not come out, I suppose, the last 13, 14 minutes of that ball game.
Yep. I saw
which
that
is
tweet as well.
incredible to think about as it relates to RJ Davis's play coming into this game when it comes to Armando Bacot. Pushing the personnel, you talked about the strategy. Personnel, have you seen any sort of improvement as it relates to Hubert?
Yeah, I think like he's been really good with in-game adjustments, rotations, lineups. For one, I love that you mentioned Seth Trimble, because he is a fan favorite. I'm trying to like, I don't know. I talked to him a little bit after one of the games. I'm trying to, build that relationship there so I can be like, yo, come on the pod as the roof, because I think he'd be a good interview. But I told him like, hey man, I know I'm like media right now, but I'm also, this is like off the record. I was like, I'm a Carolina fan, and I'm really glad you didn't transfer, just because like you look at what type of players normally transfer, and it is those high 4-star, sometimes 5-stars who don't get much burn their freshman year. A lot of times they end up in the portal, and that was Trimble's story. Like he was fringe 5-star coming in, was playing a consistent like 10, 15 minutes throughout the first half of the season last year, and completely fell out of the rotation because he was an offensive negative. He's completely gained, like just reshaped his jump shot, tweaked his mechanics. He's way more confident when he gets in the lane now. It used to be last year he'd get into the paint and not know what he was doing. And he's the best perimeter defender. And I think, to Hubert's credit, when it comes to even this game in particular, like he is good about realizing what lineups are working and sticking with it. And in some sense, like the extreme version of that was the Iron Five, when Carolina made the national championship, playing like 5 dudes, and they had a 6-man who would it would be either DeMarco Dunn or Dontrez Styles, who would get like 3 minutes off the bench, or Puff Johnson. It's like, which one of those 3 you're going to get your 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like there have been some games this year where Jalen Washington, who backs up Armando Bacot, it's some games he'll get like 10 to 15 other minutes. Other games against more athletic front courts, it's like he'll try him out there, and if it doesn't work, he's out of there, and he goes to either Zayden High or he goes to Jalen Withers, gives him some minutes at the 5, backing up Armando. Like, yeah, I think he's done a really good job with managing the rotations. Really the biggest question I have with him right now is just continuing to like evaluate talent and build a roster. And I know it's hard to build a roster in this current day of NIL, because you probably can't pay everybody what they want. So I definitely cut him some slack there. But yeah, that's what I want to see continue, is maybe a little more of a complete roster. I think Carolina still has 2 open scholarships. Yeah, they went into the season with 11 scholarship players.
Yeah. He's done a really wonderful job in the transfer portal, which you have mentioned, and I'm glad we were able to highlight what he's doing in game. I think, what was it, Paxton Wojcik as well, coming over from Brown?
Yeah.
He had a big shot against
I
Clemson.
know. He knocked it like a step back three off the bounce. Like,
Yeah, you talk about, we mentioned Cormac Ryan as well. So Carolina in the top 10. So this is my next question for you, Riley. Let's have a little fun. Let's see if you can get inside my brain here. There are two teams in the top 10 that I'm truly baffled that they're just not getting the attention, I don't think, the last couple weeks. This is from what I'm seeing on my Twitter, on my viewing of the TV, things of that nature. There's two teams in the top 10. And I feel like nobody's really saying, yes, this is a threat. Who do you think those two teams are for me that I'm viewing?
are they in the AP top 10?
Yes. I mean, yes.
Let me pull up the AP poll.
Pull up the AP poll. And let me kind of rephrase this again because I feel like I was a bit unclear on my explanation. There are two
Like they're not
teams
getting enough national title buzz, or
I personally don't think so. In the last couple weeks.
Okay, I still think Illinois has national title upside, even with the uncertainty around Terrence Shannon. Is that one of them?
It's not.
Arizona? Are we going to go with the homer pick? I know Arizona's got plenty of us. It can't be Oklahoma.
It's not Oklahoma.
Tennessee?
It's Tennessee. So, but I think I have an answer as to why that is. I feel like everyone is just so caught up in Rick Barnes's preconceived notions of him that he's not going to get it done in the tournament. And I'm trying to say, like, every single year is different. Mm-hmm. And we've seen coaches get over that hump. So I think I understand why people are not talking about Tennessee the last couple of days. And also they had a 3-game losing streak, which is a bit unfair because they went up against complete buzzsaws and now they're dismantling teams. They're awesome, man. I think they're so good. The other team though, Riley, and I tweeted this, is your Carolina Tar Heels. I can't put a finger on why nobody takes them seriously as a threat. Am I wrong in that assumption?
I don't really hear that many people say, like, yeah, I haven't. I mean, I mentioned Greg Waddell with sleepers. He was the first who I've heard recently. Like after the Tennessee game, we did a reaction pod to it, like for the sleepers channel, separate from the pod as the roof. But he told me, he was like said on air recording, like, how do you look at this team and not think they can win a national title? Which at the time I was like, that's insane. Fast forward a month later, and I'm like, I'm kind of there. Like I would say I know a good UNC team when I see one, and really in the Bahamas at Atlantis. I know Carolina lost to Villanova, but I was like, this kind of has the makings of a good UNC team. And I mean, it's definitely the best team they've had since 2019. The Kobe White, Cam Johnson, Luke May iteration of the Tar Heels. That was a 1 seed, lost in the Sweet 16. I think it has a lot of that same type of upside, similar Ken Pom numbers. And I look back at that team and thought it was good enough to win the national title. I think, like, for me personally, I look at the current landscape and think of the favorites as Purdue, UConn, Arizona. With UConn, it's contingent on getting Donovan Clingan back. And I know what, Kansas has that crazy resume. Kansas's resume is insane. It's insane how many great teams they've already beaten. I know what, like, the Ken Pom numbers say about Houston. I know Arizona lost to Stanford and quite frankly got like decimated by Stanford, but sure. I've just watched those teams enough to know, like, I mean, they're all physical. They all have size. They all defend, and they all have guards that can play make. And I think Carolina is probably, in my mind, like a half step below that title favorite team, just because I think they lack a little bit of the athleticism and size that those, like, the 3-man contenders have. And maybe that's what's keeping it, combined with sort of the perception from last year is like, oh, we were all burned by a preseason #1 team that never got it together, and that had no bench and no chemistry and completely fell apart.
I'm wondering if there is a bit of that stink coming over from last year, which isn't fair though, because like I said, every single year is different. But when you look, like, what's so puzzling to me, Riley, is we give so much of the benefit of the doubt to strong programs. Check for Carolina. Let's take it a step above. Recent title winning programs. Check Carolina. Guys, this is a blue blood. Like, why are we not talking about the North Carolina Tar Heels as title favorites? Again, I totally understand Purdue, who, by the way, as we're recording this, Riley, is down 11 we might
They're down
see.
11?
Yeah, they're down
On
11. I was
Peacock, it doesn't count.
Oh my! If that's true, then the Arizona game doesn't count as well because that was on Peacock. But I was sitting here and I was like, I can pinpoint. I'm pretty sure I know why nobody's talking about Tennessee the last couple days.
Mhm.
Why? Like I was just trying to get a better understanding of why no North Carolina, and they
Yeah.
look strong, man. And you got NC State and Cuse this week, which should be fun.
Can I throw like a super homer response
Please.
to why? Because Duke controls the media narrative from from the triangle. I mean, it's always going to be constant Duke content that gets churned out with the the 5 stars and the ESPN specials and the Coach K propaganda. Like no one wants to talk about Carolina because, and to some degree, it's like last few seasons. You have 2020 year, Carolina won 14 games, worst Carolina team of my fandom, not of my lifetime, but of my fandom. Next year, weird COVID year, they lost in the first round. Roy retires. Next year, they make the national title game, and for some reason, everybody just wants to say, "Oh, they were good for 3 weeks," when really they played really good ball for like the last 2 months of the season. It's just that the ACC was in the middle of a smear campaign, and no one wanted to give them credit for beating any like relatively tough ACC team. And then last year, of course, they were bad. Like there's no justification for that. They were bad. They were very, very disappointing. So that combined with, I do say my Homer Duke takes a little bit facetiously. I'm not that bitter about it, but I just, I got to at least get my jokes off a little bit.
I don't blame you for that. Duke currently up 15 on the road at Pitt, but
I
here,
was
I mean,
hoping
but
Pitt could do us a solid, man. Like, come on. Duke's been really bad on the road this year. I can't believe that they're handling
well,
Pitt
yeah,
as
and
we
they
speak. But
they they barely beat Notre Dame, but I mean that's another sort of just general topic. And I know this
mhm.
is, and I'd have no issues bringing this up with the sleepers guys because I respect them and I think their content is great. The one thing I do politely disagree with them on is, they're basically saying it isn't necessarily reacting. It's having it's having your thoughts based on how they're playing today. And I'm over here saying, like, let's just take it easy for a minute. It's the same thing with Hubert Davis. And so, like, Michigan State wasn't playing well to start. And I know Carter's talking about them. It's like they stink. And then they turn a corner and they're pretty decent again. They smashed Indiana State and then they lose again. But as it relates to Duke, everyone's saying like, what's wrong with them? And I'm over here like, so they lost by a couple to Arizona, who's a very good team at home. They did beat Michigan State. They struggled a little bit. Like I just at a high level, Riley, my kind of cutoff point is February
Mhm.
first week of February. If you are stinky approaching Valentine's Day, I'm probably going to be out on you, but I'll give you up until that point for the most part.
I do actually remember your tweet about Duke after probably when they were 5-3, and maybe it was after they reeled off like the wins over like Hofstra and Charlotte, I want to say. And I wanted so badly to be like, dude, come on, this team stinks. Like you're wrong. And it turns out you might have been right.
Well,
I
so
remember seeing that, be like, come on, Subbi, like pile on them. Let's talk about how soft this team is and that they're overrated. And
I mean, I'd love to do that. Look, I'm no soothsayer because I'm over here saying like, let's enjoy Indiana, Michigan State. They might stink. Both of those teams I mean, Indiana hasn't looked good, but
yeah, Indiana's
uh,
been bad.
yeah. But hey, NC State and Syracuse this week. What's with you guys and playing orange teams early on Saturday? But NC State, Syracuse, big tilts this week.
Mhm.
What are you looking for this week?
I mean, obviously you want to go 2-0 at worst, 1-1. You can't lose both. The NC State game, I don't know. I never really get worried about Carolina playing NC State. The track record there is like Roy Williams literally was 32-5 against NC State.
Is that
32 and
true?
5. Yes, 32 and 5. It might have even been 34 and 5. I know he only lost to them 5 times his entire career. At one point, he had as many national titles as he did NC State. He was like 29-3 against them and then lost 2 in his last couple of years, which bums me out.
That
Like,
is
how
staggering.
insane is that?
That is
Oh,
staggering.
yeah, like that. It's just it's a game that UNC always gets up for, and I think UNC 8 times out of 10, maybe even 9 times out of 10, has the talent advantage. And when you combine that, it doesn't matter how excited NC State is. Like Carolina's usually able to take care of business. DJ Burns still a scary matchup. In the games last year, we didn't really have anyone who could guard him. said this on the pod as a roof, but I think Armando Bacot is playing maybe the best defense of his career. We just saw him take out PJ Hall for pretty much an entire game. So I like his chances against them. And on the other side of things, I know, like I mentioned, Hubert's been running more like secondary break type stuff, but he also knows that this team is at its best when he runs spread pick and roll concepts and lets RJ Davis cook. And if you put DJ Burns in ball screens, I think there's a recipe for success. And I don't really trust NC State's guards, even though they've largely been better than I expected. Like DJ Horn in particular is shooting at a high clip, and Jaden Taylor's been pretty good for them, who, yeah, I didn't think was really that good coming from Butler. But still, it's that backcourt, I think, is still a significant step down from Traquavion Smith and Jarkel Joyner that were like just two of the most electric guards in the country last year.
Yeah. I'm excited for that game. And then Syracuse as well. Red Autry's done a pretty nice job, I
Yeah,
would say, successing Jim Boeheim.
I think the Syracuse team going into the year, I thought they could end up being a top 4, top 5 team in the ACC. On paper, I like a lot of their pieces. They have a ton of just like wings that range from like 6'6" to 6'9", and as a whole, the ACC, they don't have too many big teams like that are sort of interchangeable, like 2 through 4 on the perimeter. And I think you've seen flashes from guys like Quadir Copeland. You've seen flashes from Malik Brown, who's had some big shooting nights for them. JJ Starling hasn't quite put it all together yet. I know Judah Mintz is always going to get to the free throw line and just attack the basket relentlessly. It's a team like, I don't know. They have their work cut out for them to go to Chapel Hill and get a win, especially because like the Dean Dome crowds this year have been on another level. It's like the town of Chapel Hill, the alumni there all completely bought back in on this team. But it's one of those, you like for Syracuse, they eventually got to get one of these big games. They've lost to most, I think their record looks okay, but they've lost to pretty much anybody they played with the pulse. So it's a big opportunity for them coming to Chapel Hill if they want to show like, we're at least going to get on the bubble and try to make a little tournament push.
I think rooting for a team that you just described, like a Syracuse, would be so torturous for me. The reason being is because like the record looks all right. And you say, yeah, maybe if we can stack a few more wins, get to 22 wins, we can hear our name on Selection Sunday. I'd rather root for a team like Seton Hall, who probably has a somewhat similar record to Syracuse, but they got wins against Providence, Marquette, and UConn, man. So they got some really good wins. So to your point, Riley, like, yeah, you obviously don't want to drop the bad ones, and they came close against dropping one to Georgetown. But now, really, all they got to do is feast on the bottom of the Big East, maybe get a couple middling teams, and they're good to go for sure. But a Syracuse team, at some point, the clock's going to start ticking, and the opportunities are going to start waning, where you got to get these victories. Like it's not enough to just be close. I think we're now past the point, and this is another thing that kind of sticks in my craw is, well, let me congratulate these guys on scheduling a very tough game. Yeah, but they lost by 5. Like I'd rather give credit to a win.
I see that for sure. And even in Syracuse's case, it's like they scheduled pretty hard, and they hung with Tennessee for like 30 minutes. They hung with Duke for 30 minutes and then lost those games by like 18 and 20 respectively. And the committee's not going to look at those losses and be like, wow, y'all got blown out. It's not going to be like, oh, you hung around for 25, 30 minutes. What doesn't make sense to me is how like when it unravels for them, it like super unravels.
Yeah. That's true. When they get punched pretty hard, it's like, hands up, I'll take the gloves off.
Yeah, I'm like, how do you? Because I remember watching that Tennessee game, and I think we actually were recording a pod as the roof like during that game, and both me and Jacob were like really high on Syracuse going into the year. We did a little mini ACC preview on our pod. We're like, Syracuse, dark horse team, could be top 4, top 5, a lot of talent there. And as we were recording, it was like probably 10 minutes left. We're like, Syracuse might do this, and we got off the pod. I'm like, how is Syracuse losing by 18? Same thing happened in the Duke game, man. They were right there and just gave up a 13-2 run, and it was over.
Yeah, sometimes their performances, and it's the same with Boeheim the last couple of years. Sometimes their performances, you're just like, I don't know.
Yeah,
I can't justify this.
Boeheim teams did that a lot too. Now that you mentioned it, and they give Carolina a good game for 30 minutes, and then it's like, nope, adversity hits, they're done.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, so in my estimation, in my assessment of Carolina, I think you score the ball well. You make your free throws. I mentioned you didn't get to the line that often against
Mhm.
Clemson, but when you do go to the line, you make them, which is important come tournament time. You rebound relatively well. Where is the most glaring area of improvement for you, Riley?
Like from where I'd like to see Carolina continue to improve, or like from last year. Or
Where, when you look at this year's team, I just
Mhm.
mentioned some of the things that I think you do well.
Oh, uh-huh, uh-huh.
Where are some of the things that you think, and I'm being very, this is like my corporate speak, you have an area for improvement as opposed to just saying, you guys
Where do
aren't
y'all
good at
suck?
this.
Yeah.
Where can you improve?
Rebounding has been way better the past 2 games because they were getting out rebounded by like everybody through the first part of the season. And that to me is like sustain it. I'm glad there's been some good strides, and it's not just been Armando. Like both Cormac Ryan and Harrison Ingram have been really good at like crashing the glass recently. RJ will throw his body in there too. But even Ingram, it was against Pitt. His shot wasn't falling, and he grabbed 15 boards against. I mean, I think numerically Pitt had been the best offensive rebounding team in the ACC up to that point. I would say offensively, there's still the big key is Elliot Cadeau, who I was really high on going into the year. Still think he's very talented, but we know like the history of reclass guards in general, and he's running into some of those same issues. He's getting plenty of opportunity. Like it's not like he's unplayable. Teams are starting to sag off him a little bit more because he's shooting like 28% from three on the year. And there are flashes where it almost seems like there are times where if you let him work out of a ball screen, he can get to the rim at will. He's great at pushing tempo. He's great at, obviously a great passer. But some of the numbers I think with him on the court have, I think, the on off numbers offensively are not quite where you'd want them to be considering his pedigree. But I think like the good news with that is, if he's off, or you can play Seth Trimble for extended stretches, who's giving you quality play on both ends of the court. But I think honestly the presence of Seth Trimble has allowed Hubert to have the freedom to like keep starting Cadeau so his confidence doesn't falter, and hopefully like play through some of these issues so that by the time you get to February, March, the chemistry is, or that the offense is humming a little bit better. Because through the first, like, I want to say the first like 10 games or so, or the first 7 or 8 games, the Cadeau RJ like advanced metrics, the numbers were insane. Like how well RJ's like true shooting percentage was. It seemed like he was really benefiting from playing with a pass first guard. But more recently, some of the offensive numbers haven't been as good, and I think that's what they got to figure it out. They got to find the ideal combo, like lineup combos to put around Cadeau, and just help him with some like easy sets or easy actions that can get his confidence going.
Yeah, it's I commend Elliot Cadeau for this transition. And you obviously mentioned his youth or alluded to it with the reclass.
Mhm.
But on the flip side, his teammates are old. They're not
Yeah.
even just like sophomores or juniors, right? Like RJ Davis, Armando Baycott, these guys at Cormac Ryan, these guys have been around the block quite a bit. And
Mhm.
so he's not just some regular old freshman playing with older guys. He's a 18-year-old. I think he's 18, right?
I actually think
Playing
he's
with,
19 because he's old
oh, is
for
he
he would have been
19?
old for his grade. Yeah,
Okay.
that was like part of why people were pretty high on him still, even with the reclass
Got it.
happening. But
Still very young though, and adjusting
mhm.
to the game and having these older teammates. Really, it'll be interesting to watch how he continues to try and get comfortable. Because make no mistake about it, Riley, if you are looking for a deep run in March, at some point he's going to have to come up big
Yeah,
for
I
you.
agree completely with that. With UNC needs, they have to keep working through any issues with him when his limitations and working around it if they want to hit their ceiling. Because I mean, he's I think he's the most talented player on the roster. He's the best NBA prospect on the roster. And I know he's like against Clemson, it was nice to see him. He took like a three off the bounce, took a pull up, jumper off a ball screen. Didn't make either, but it's like, okay, you got to at least be aggressive here and show teams you're not afraid to shoot it. Make them respect you more. And so, yeah, I think he'll figure it out. Especially getting some home games mixed in, because this is
Yeah.
like Carolina's game against NC State will be their third straight road game, and it's a couple of nice home games mixed in there. Get the crowd behind you, and maybe things start clicking. But yeah, the hope is by the end of January, early February, that you're getting more like 10.6 assist nights from him or something. I think
See,
that
there
was
you go. End of January, early February. The book's not out on Elliot Cadeau. We don't have to react that quick. We
well said. Well said.
hey, there's some other storylines going on in the ACC that I want to talk to you about. You referenced Boston earlier this episode. BC. Can we talk a little BC basketball? All right. Like I'm dead serious, Riley. They're having a
They're kind
nice
of
year.
good. I know.
They're having a nice year. Quentin Post might be the best player in the ACC. Nobody knows about. All right.
Quentin Post is nasty, dude. Quentin Post is a problem, and he's hitting
He
three
is
pointers now.
he is a problem. Thank you, Riley. So I'm like hearkening back to my days when Sean Sean Williams, Jared Dudley, Craig Smith were leading the Boston College Eagles, and like they would wheel in, because the thing is, and Jacob will confirm this. I don't know where Jacob's from, but Boston is not a college town, right? It's a pro town. So when BC was in the tournament, which was Al Skinner days, right? They'd wheel in the TV during the day and we'd watch them, right? And that was a big part of my March Madness experience. As crazy as that might sound to people, like, what is this weirdo doing watching like Jared Dudley, Boston College, Al Skinner? Yeah, I'm not saying they're a tournament team,
right?
But any thoughts on Boston College and their and how they're playing this year? I think it's been fun.
You know, I've only caught snippets of their games here and there. I caught some of their game against Georgia Tech. I'm surprised they're 10-4. Like, did they? I don't think they lost a bye game this year, which hasn't really been the case for BC in probably a decade. So, dude, like,
the bar is, if your pod is the roof, the bar for BC, that the podcast will be the bar is in hell. Like that.
The pod is in hell.
Yeah.
The pod is don't lose a bye game. The bye game is the roof. I will say, like, I'm impressed that Claudel Harris has done pretty well for them. He was someone like, so often you rarely see Big South transfers thrive in the ACC. And he was even someone came from like a Charleston Southern team that won, I think, 6 games last year. I don't know if they ever hit double-digit wins in his career there. Maybe they got 10 wins one of those years. But I thought that was just kind of like a desperation pickup from Earl Grant to get a dude who had any semblance of being able to get a bucket, who was just going to get picked apart defensively. But yeah, he's worked out well for them. And yeah, I mean, Jaden Zachary had some moments last year. I know Prince Aligbe has a little bit of pedigree behind his name, like as a recruit and everything. So, I mean, maybe they're an NIT team, which I think would be a huge victory. Like, when's the last
postseason play?
Like, gosh, BC they haven't made any sort of postseason since 2009. How is that possible to go that long? They had Kai Bowman. They in a lottery picking Jerome Robinson. Like
Jerome Robinson, yeah. I don't know, man. Like, they've had some decent players, some fun players to watch, but I don't know. It was just and look, for the viewers out there, I asked Riley prior to recording. I was like, you want me to send over some of the agenda topics? And Riley said, no, let's have it be spontaneous. So I was like, all right, I got a curveball for you.
So yeah, that was a curveball. I'm like, as much as I love the ACC, I can't say I'm super locked in on Boston College, but I have watched them enough to know that Quentin Post is nasty. And if you haven't watched him, he's a big Dutch dude who just gets buckets in the post. He's a physical specimen, 7 foot, over 230, and he can hit threes. So
I'm telling you, New England basketball is in this perpetual state of, you know what? That's not a bad. That's a good win, and they just beat Georgia Tech, BC, right? I forget who it was who had 28, 4, and 5, or whatever the stat line was, but BC just beats Georgia Tech, and like Georgia Tech's not good, but good for you, BC. And then I'm looking at the scores today. Rhode Island's just been awful under Archie Miller for the most part, but they go into Davidson, a 10-win Davidson team, and win their 3rd straight. So it's like, hey, you know what? Good job. Good job. And now they got a big tilt against UMass on Saturday. So I'm being spontaneous for you, Riley. All right.
No. I'm sorry, I can't contribute more to the New England hoops dialogue.
Let's get back down south then. Okay. We've referenced this game, this Carolina Clemson game, a couple times. Your reaction to me telling you this, I still don't trust Clemson yet. All right. And I'm over here exposing and calling out people for their preconceived notions about Rick Barnes and Tennessee, I'm applying that to Clemson, Riley, because I've seen this story where the Clemson Brad Brownell team, excuse me, has performed very well in November and December, and then the wheels don't necessarily fall off, but they start getting a little loose. All
Mhm.
right, and that's enough for them to have missed tournaments before in the recent past. I don't
It is.
necessarily think that they're going to miss the tournament, but I don't trust them just yet. I thought Saturday was a monster opportunity at home to get a win against a very good opponent. I understand Carolina is very good. I suppose we'll see what happens here from Clemson. In or out on Clemson?
I'm still in on Clemson. It's a team that I picked second in the ACC in the preseason. I had Duke first, Clemson second. I really just like the makeup of a bunch of veterans, and I like their guard play. I know Chase Hunter hasn't had quite the season that he had last year. Like his stats haven't been as good. I didn't expect. I know Joe Girard like really disappeared against Carolina. I think he was 1 for 10 and didn't play well against Miami either. And he looked like Syracuse Joe Girard in those games where it did, like at Syracuse when he was there, it seemed like he shouldered so much of the shot creation load that there were some games where he'd go off for 30, but more often than not, there's way too many like sub 40% shooting nights. And he looked like that those last two games for Clemson, and it didn't make sense to me because it's like you actually have playmakers around you this time. Like why is he wearing down as much? But generally speaking, I still like that fit. I think Brownell has enough of a history, enough of a system that you think that he'd be able to hide him some defensively, which was really never the case at Syracuse. I think PJ Hall is still an All-American. I know he got sort of shoved in a locker by Armando Bacot this past weekend, but when you look at the numbers he's done, when you look at what he's done throughout his career, both as like a rim protector and also having a versatile game, like he can take you down in the post, but his perimeter game has only gotten better and better like these last two seasons. And they still kind of have a wild card with Jack Clark if he ever gets healthy. I know that's sort of been the case throughout Jack Clark's career, but it might be a slight exaggeration to say he has guard skills at 6'7", 6'8", but he has a perimeter game. He can shoot and he can handle a little bit, and I like that, just having that extra chest piece if he gets healthy. And I got to give a shout out to Ian Shefflin,
I
is
love
so,
that guy.
dude, he's so freaking tough, and dude's BMI has got to be. Dude's BMI has got to be like technically in the obese range, like he does not look like an athlete, but he's just tough as nails. And even last year, they would let him like play make a little bit. And I just generally like the construction of the roster, even if there's not a clear cut pro. And they're old. Like that's why I think that I hope that they can sort of keep it up and not completely let it fall off the rails.
I think that's very fair. And a lot of times here, Riley, and I'll be brutally honest with you and my audience, when I have a thought and something, a result backs that up, uh, I'm just going to drive my agenda forward. A lot of what you said made sense as it relates to Clemson, though. Like they were pretty competitive with a national title contending team with Joe Girard playing poorly, with PJ
Mm-hmm.
Hall playing poorly. And that's okay, by the way, PJ Hall, which I mean, Armando Bacot has locked up his fair share of players
Mm-hmm.
in the past. Ian Shefflin, unbelievable performance, right? So a lot of things did go wrong for Clemson, and I actually credit Carolina for contributing to that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad you brought up Shefflin, man, because I'm watching him and I'm like, he's out rebounding everyone. He's the first to the floor. He's got a quick first jump, like not a
Mm-hmm.
quick first step, but he's got a quick first
He
jump.
gets off the yeah.
He's back up there. I mean, he was their best player. He was
Mm-hmm.
Clemson's best player. But right now I'm still a little apprehensive on Clemson. But I think what's going to be important is seeing how they respond because again, I kind of look at them like Illinois. And the Illinois game against Purdue, my thought was, let me see them be competitive. All right, because they kind of flounder towards January and February. They were competitive and they fought back, and I'm very much in on Illinois.
Yeah, I'm still in on Illinois too. I know I kind of hinted at it earlier, but that's a nice little comparison there. Both teams that you want to see like show that they can sustain it, even when they're obviously very different situations that could be derailing their seasons. But yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I know it's late. I want to get you out of here on a few quick hitters, have a little fun. All right. So,
Let's
next
do it.
episode, Riley, I'm not going to reveal this just yet. All right. Because next episode, I will reveal it. It's going to be our midway takes. All right. So, I want you to think of it like this: think of all of your preseason takes, if you can, and bucket them as best as possible. It doesn't have to be all the preseason takes, by the way, but whatever fits best into this one bucket that is, as we sit here today, midway through the season, um, a take that is completely on fire. It's not happening. A take that is trending in the right direction, but we're not 100% slam dunking. A take that is trending in a downward direction, but it's not over just yet. And then a fourth bucket where a take is, I was right. Like, I don't even need to wait to the end of the season. Go in whichever order you please.
Yeah, let me see if I can find the bold predictions I made before the season. Let's see, let's see. All right, the take that it's on fire. Jeez, oh my gosh.
Like, there's no redemption for this take.
There might be no redemption for either of these. I said that both Boise State would make the Elite Eight and that Ohio State would have a breakthrough season and make the Elite Eight or further.
Boise State, last I checked, is up on Colorado State. We don't know.
Oh, maybe not on fire yet.
They're up 13.
Let's go, Broncos, baby. They're getting rolling. That's not on fire then. Um, what else? So I said ECU would be the second best team in the American behind FAU. I think that one's
Oh,
dead. I think
that
that
one's
one's really
done.
dead.
I gotta
That one's
give
dead.
that to Memphis. Actually, it's FAU probably.
Yeah, right. Oh man, so these are my boldest takes too. Like but I
Yeah.
did like believe them all. Like I did it with Carter and Greg on a Sleepers podcast, and the caveat was like we all did these and we had to actually believe them. So we'll roll with them.
Can I say one quick thing about ECU? I tweeted the other day. I was like, give it a few years. And I like what they're building. I don't know how many more years of eligibility Bobby Pettiford has, but
He probably still has two.
I feel like they're competitive in all of their losses.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't hate
And
that.
if they can keep Ezra Asar, like that dude's pretty good. And I like that they have a Felton, RJ Felton. No idea if he has any relation to Raymond Felton, but he's from South Carolina, so maybe there's some connection there. But yeah, and I like Mike Schwartz. I think Mike Schwartz is a good coach. That was a good hire for them from coming over from Tennessee. He was Rick Barnes' defensive coordinator for those who might not be plugged into the ECU Pirates. Can't say I blame you. They don't have much history, but two takes that I think are on their way to happening. K-State missing the dance, Virginia missing the dance. Those are two more bold predictions. I didn't think either of them would be tournament teams.
Man, if I could shake your hand through the screen regarding K-State. Now, Virginia, it's still a solid take in the sense that, yeah, I don't think Virginia is making the tournament, but I think you would have found some other folks saying that. Man, I was still hyped for year 2 of Tang and Tyler Perry. I said Tyler
Mhm.
Perry was going to be Big 12 Player of the Year.
I
Like,
thought he was going to be an All-American. I think I voted him like a top 15 player for the Almanac. So yeah, I'm
that
with you.
K-State pick is very strong.
I was in on Tang and I was in on Tyler Perry, but as I was looking at the rest of the roster, because I guess we voted for our All American teams in the Almanac probably like June or July. So this was where my mind changed from like July to November. When the more I looked at this K State roster, the more I was like,
Wow.
can't say I'm feeling this one.
It, it's been such a disjointed start. I mean, it's not even a start. We're at the midway point of the season, but it's just been so
Yeah,
disjointed, huh? Clunky.
yeah. Here's one of my. I think this take is not dead. It was like it was one of my favorite. It was probably my favorite bold prediction. St. John's has a scholarship player quit mid-season. I just
What?
was. I thought St. John's was going to be a disaster, and for the first like month of the season, I was beating my chest like, yes, Chris Ledlam is about to quit this team. Like he's, because he was so bad. I can't remember what MTE they played in around Thanksgiving. There's the one that Houston was in too. Like he looked terrible. The team looked terrible.
Was it the Michigan game?
What? No, it was after the Michigan game.
Oh,
Let me pull it up real quick. Was it in the Cayman Islands? It might have been the Cayman Island Classic that they played in or something. They lost to Dayton, barely beat North Texas, and then they got a win over Utah, that's aging pretty well.
yeah.
But yeah, now like I think St. John's is very much in the at large conversation, and it seems like Patino is not washed up like I thought he might be. And part of this was because St. John fans were just talking reckless on Twitter, like, we're gonna get Ian Jackson, Patino's flipping in from Carolina. Like, so I was like, get lost. Like, I hate these dudes. Like, y'all haven't made a tournament outside of a first four since like the 80s. Like what are you talking about? But so
That
that
seems
takes
that seems very like it's reality being brought online, like a bunch of New Yorkers coming like that go to Duke, and then you're just involved with them, talking shit to them. I don't know, that there's some sort of connection there.
Okay, this one is legitimately on fire, and there's no way this will happen. I said this was because I did it with Carter and Greg, Sleepers Media. Plug for them. I love those guys. They put out great content. Carter's a Michigan State fan. Greg's a Michigan fan. So this was slightly my Greg and Carter pander take. I said Cohen Carr and George Washington III would be top 3 in Big Ten Freshman of the Year voting. And I don't know if George Washington III has played more than 5 minutes in a game. And Michigan is an abject disaster. That team is nightmarish.
Them and UCLA have quit. So I feel bad. I appreciate you bearing your soul here. So I'm going to throw one out that I know it's not I don't know if it's on fire, but it was just a bad take. I believed it at the time, and there might still be a little time, but I had Todd Golden winning SEC Coach of the Year. And I was like, yo, man, if you can beat Kentucky, we're okay for this.
You're in business.
You're in business. But now I'm over here like, okay, Mike White has Georgia on a 9-game winning streak. Lamont Paris is doing really well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Rick Barnes or John Calipari are going to get it just because of how seasoned they are, but they deserve it more than Todd Golden. I'm like, Todd Golden's not going to get this, is he?
Yeah, it's not. I wouldn't say that one's completely dead because I think Florida they're kind of better than I expected, and they get plenty of opportunities in the SEC.
How'd I miss Ole Miss too?
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you saying?
No, I was gonna say one SEC take I had that I still feel pretty good about. One of my bold predictions was Auburn winning the SEC, which that one could be coming true. And then I had a Caleb Love case that I'm feeling Caleb Love take that I'm feeling really good about. I said Caleb Love shoots 40+% from the field for the first time in his career, but has a lower assist numbers than the last 2 seasons. I actually think he's averaging more assists than he did at Carolina last year, but he's like well over 40% from the field, isn't he?
Yeah, man.
I think he's.
I was just gonna say, Riley, like he has been a blessing for me, and having spoken with you last year, and I actually know a lot of Carolina fans. They're like, look, it's gonna be a roller coaster, and I was like, you know what, you're right. And when we got him, I was like, just temper the expectations. There's going to be bad nights. There's going to be some really fun nights, but that's going to be the enjoyment of watching Caleb Love play. Sitting here, knock on wood, it's been mostly enjoyment, I have to say.
Yeah, and I love it for him. I mean, he's someone, I think he got unfairly blamed for a lot of UNC struggles last year. I would be really, I don't know if we'd ever get him or Hubert to be honest enough to say, like, how much of what percentage do each of you think you actually shoulder the blame for that? Because I think if they are, they probably would admit that, like, neither one of them, were at their peak performance last year. And, there were times where it seemed like Hubert didn't hold him accountable enough. But even I remember talking to Caleb after the UNC beat Clemson in the Dean Dome last year by 20, and Caleb sort of locked up Chase Hunter, which I said I'm a big fan of his game. And I asked him, like, hey man, what sort of led to this defensive performance? And he said to me, I've really been focused on my defense this week. If I'm being honest, I can fall asleep off ball sometimes. It's like, I know sometimes I can not be very active off ball. But that game in particular, I still remember him chasing Chase Hunter around screens and sticking with them. And so yeah, there are times where Caleb Love would even be pretty honest assessing his own performance. And yeah, he was someone who I always liked talking to after games, when we with the media, it's player interviews and stuff. And obviously I'm never going to hold any ill will toward him because he hit the 3rd biggest shot in UNC history against our most hated rival. And then to top it all off, that game in Cameron, he had Tar Heel for life written on his shoes, which just touched my heart. Exactly. I'm so glad he got to go out on a win in Cameron. That just makes me so happy.
I was happy for him too. And it seems as if it was an amicable, breakup, at least
Mhm.
from the fan base
For sure.
perspective. Hey, I don't necessarily like doing the what team's going to make the final four, like all that stuff, because it's a complete crapshoot. If we're being totally, we like to think we probably know a lot more than some other folks, but that doesn't really mean diddly as it relates to filling out brackets, right? So Carolina will be a what seed come tourney time? That's what I want to ask.
3 seed. That's my prediction. 3 seed.
Okay. Now,
I know that.
I was just going to say 3 as in like that is what it's going to be, or minimum 3 seed.
I would say minimum. I want to say minimum 4 seed. The not wanting to jinx it. I want to, like, there's part of me that was like, oh, I'll play it safe and say 5 or 6 seed. But I think minimum 4 seed. I think they'll be firmly in that the top, like the protected seed line. I just think the reason why I say 3 instead of 2, I know most brackets have them as a 2 right now. Just because the ACC has less Q1 opportunities than like the Big 12 and the SEC, and I'm sure they're going to drop a dumb game at some point and not be able to make it up with a Q1 win. And yeah, that I would feel like that's the safest best bet right now to say they'll be a 3 seed.
I'm not your
But
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I still think they have a Final Four national championship type ceiling.
I'm not your content advisor, but when they or if they drop that dumb game, which Arizona's dropped a dumb game, they're probably going to drop another dumb game. Are we going to be going on pot as the roof and saying, should we worry about Carolina?
We are not going to be saying that. Like, Jacob and I, like, we do have a rule, basically, like, because we were planning on reacting to the UConn game after it happened, and Carolina went down 15 in the second half, and we were like, let's wait a couple days, let's let it sit, let's let it marinate a little bit to keep us from being too reactionary or clickbaity. And I actually think we've said throughout the pod, it's like, hey, when Carolina loses a game, I think we said going into the UConn and the Kentucky games, like, if Carolina drops one of these, do not freak out. These are really good teams.
That's all it is, man. And like they're college kids, right? And I saw something so beautifully written, and it was about the Celtics, because everyone thinks the Celtics should be breaking the Warriors 73-9 record, but they said nobody expects the Celtics to win every game. They expect them to win each game. Does that make sense? Is that like when they're in every single night, they're like, oh,
right,
we should win this game.
Yeah.
But when you take a step back, it's like, no, there's no way we're going to go 82-0. But then you get into it. I don't know. I thought that was brilliant.
And I even think with your team, with Arizona, like, they, like, after I got to be at that game in Cameron, and I left it being like, oh, this team is national title good. This team is scary. They didn't even have a great Caleb Love game. Like, Boswell probably finished with like 12-7 that game or something, but his game isn't especially flashy. He's just really freaking tough and a great passer and makes big shots. I love Kashad Johnson. I think that dude is awesome. He makes number 16 look cool, which is like a terrible basketball number, but it looks dope on Kashad Johnson. But yeah, like, I've been saying all year, I've had them in my top 3 really since that game. But you lose to Florida Atlantic, and then you drop that head scratcher to Stanford. And because we do a top 25 poll for Heat Check every week, and I'm like, how far do I drop Arizona? Like, I don't actually think they're not a top 5 team, but do I have to because they lost to Stanford? And then they go and beat like Colorado and Utah, I still really like this Colorado team, and they beat both of them by like 1,000,000 points combined. Like,
yeah,
they're college kids. They're going to have dumb losses, but that's, yeah.
Exactly right. And you know what? Colorado was missing Tristan Da Silva and Cody Williams. They TDS returned for the ASU game. ASU not looking too bad, but I'm getting off topic here. I'm going to let you go on these last couple questions, Riley. Nothing to do with basketball, actually. So at the end of our episode last year, I asked you to refer me to someone to get them on the podcast, and that was Eli Betker, which was very kind. We did get Eli on, and he's amazing. Have you been in contact with him since Monday night's tragic loss?
Yes, I have.
How's he doing?
He's doing okay.
Right.
I think he had a pretty rough day at work because he had a 7 a.m. I think his day started at 7 a.m. for his work today, and he's dying a little bit inside. I want to take partial credit for his Washington fandom. I think Brian Ralph, who also writes for Heat Check with me. This was probably in like mid-September or October. Eli, he's a Seattle native. He is a huge, or not Washington State native. He actually lives like off an island on Washington State, like in the middle of nowhere. Fun fact about him, but he's a huge Mariners fan because he grew up going to the games. And so when their season flamed out, me and Brian Ralph were like, dude, who cares? Baseball's kind of lame. Like your college is like national title good in football. So we sort of spurred him into like this crazy Washington fandom over the past few months. But he was pretty bummed. So,
well, you're a good friend for doing that. A hell of an effort there from Washington. I was saying, right, as a current Pac-12 member, I was like, look, if Washington wins this game, that's a Pac-12 championship. If they lose this game, that's a Big Ten loss. Sorry, I don't make the rules. They're out the door. You can have them if they lose. But I had to bring up Eli. He's a great friend of the program as well. And I'll get you out of here on this here, Riley. Are you going to be okay if and when Drake May is wearing a Patriots jersey next year?
I will be okay so long as y'all like spend a ton of money on T. Higgins and like bring him some weapons. I know I mentioned my co-host Jacob Karabatsis is a huge Patriots fan. He was telling me, he's like, here's the plan. Patriots are going to draft Drake. They're going to spend a ton of money on T. Higgins and Mike Evans. And I got some news. I don't know if you know this.
I didn't know you're.
I am a huge Buccaneers fan. So
Why not the
lifelong.
Panthers?
Because when I was like 4 or 5 years old, I liked pirates and they had a pirate ship in their stadium, and it's been undying loyalty for over 2 decades now. So I'm a big Brady fan. Like I claim all 7 of Brady's rings as my own. I'm like, oh yeah, I was there all along. Not just the last one. Like they're all Bucks rings in my mind. So yeah, I don't really have any ill will toward the Patriots just because I'm a Brady guy because he was on my team for 3 years. But when Jacob said he was like, yeah, we're gonna basically get Mike Evans, I'm like, that's a bridge too far. You leave Mike Evans on my team. Mike Evans, Tampa Bay legend. Like yeah. But at the same time, if Mike Evans leaves Tampa this offseason, I will buy a jersey wherever he goes.
He is a legend, man. I love Mike Evans. It's kind of it's crazy to think, honestly, because I look back at Texas A&M and I'm like, you guys are such corny people. But I'm like, you got Johnny Manziel to go there. You had Mike Evans going there. I'm like, you got cool dudes going there. I wish they went somewhere else, but I don't know. Yeah, hey, Bucks, big game against the Eagles. They're limping into that game. The Eagles are.
I kind of think the Bucks can get it done. I wish Baker was healthy.
Got that extra day. Hopefully that
yeah,
helps.
true. Going into the season, I was pretty pessimistic. Like, I guess as a Pats fan, all the blunders of Todd Bowles, getting to coach against him for a couple of years there. That's probably like, I mean, I know Belichick's record against the Jets is great anyway, but yeah, I was out on Bowles. I'm still kind of out on Bowles. I would rather have an offensive minded head coach. I was super out on Baker. I'm like, Baker and Bowles combo is going to be 2 wins, and we're going to be the ones getting Drake May, and it's going to be sick. But the Baker renaissance has sort of won me over. Yet at the same time, if like the Bucks wanted to take Tampa native Michael Penix, I would be pretty amped about that too. So I don't know if they'll do that. Yeah, I bet they'll probably re-sign Baker to something. I wouldn't give him. I still don't think you can give him a big deal, but maybe who knows what he's looking for. But I'd like to see the Bucks bring him back on like a 2-year deal or something.
Look, man, I don't want to hear any talk about the draft in the future from you. You got a playoff game to prepare for.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Let me and Jacob look at the mock drafts and do our analysis. All right, man, because we got nothing left.
Are you more in, or if you had your pick of the top 3 of Caleb Williams, Drake, and Jaden Daniels, which one would you choose?
Caleb, man. I just don't understand why. Maybe because he paints his nails, maybe because he gets mopey at times. The guy is electric. I mean, I don't care if you paint your nails. Like his film speaks for itself in my estimation. Like the second they beat the Steelers, or maybe it was the Broncos, when they beat the Broncos, I was like, well, there goes Caleb.
Yeah,
we're not getting him. I don't think, at least. So
I'm with you on Caleb. I know USC's season ended in shambles, but like those flashes that like just the windows he can throw into, the amount of velocity on his pass, the athleticism, like, and I work with college students for my full-time job, and Gen Z is kind of mopey. That's part of the equation. Like, I'm sure like millennials are mopey. We're all mopey. It's we're in touch with our emotions. Like Caleb Williams is going to be a stud, I think.
I think that's a great way of putting it. You're absolutely right. And so we'll see. Maybe we'll get you back onto the offseason for the draft. Riley Davis, this was a blast. I've kept you way too long. Thank you so much for jumping on. Enjoy the rest of the season. We'll chat this week, okay?
Sounds good, man. I appreciate you.
Appreciate it, Riley.